Welcome to the Igniting More series on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. For more information on how Connie Coleman can help take your organization to the next level, click on the link in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to the Pregnancy Help Podcast to receive updates on all of our future episodes. Thanks for listening.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Igniting More podcast. I'm Connie W. Coleman, and I am thrilled to be here with you today. Today's episode is in partnership with Heartbeat International, and I am honored to have this opportunity to spend a little time with you today. Today's episode is part one of a two-part series. I was asked a while back to do a training on what to look for as warning signs of an organization that might be in trouble. So today is part one of that series. We'll get to part two next time. Now, the good news is that it ends on a high note, but the bad news is this episode is all of the warning signs. Next episode will be how to turn that around. So we are going to dive right in. The title of this one is, Will Your Organization Be SOAR, S-O-R-E, or will it SOAR, S-O-A-R? We're going to move past all the symptoms and try to get to the root of the infection. I do please want you to hear me. This is not about trying to get you to do your thing my way. This is simply about looking at details and looking at practices that are within your organization and watching and checking and verifying to make sure you're on the right path and that you are not headed towards crisis. If you can catch it before you get there, you are miles ahead. So let's just dive right in. Some of the warnings for today. I want to caution oversimplifying into all bad. Sometimes when we look at warning signs or things that could be detrimental to our organization, our mind goes to, well, my organization's bad or this organization is in trouble. And I don't want you to oversimplify. We're simply identifying things that could lead us into crisis. I also want to caution you of deeming an organization as bad because of a few symptoms toward the SOAR, S-O-R-E side. I also want to say up front, today is not about casting negativity on any organization, leader, or board of directors. Again, we just want to enter in today, take a realistic look at our organizations and begin seeing signs. And we want to understand that all characteristics of an organization are infectious. What do I mean by that? If you have great leadership and great morale, that is infectious throughout your organization. If you have backbiting or jockeying for position, that will be infectious throughout your organization as well. So whatever starts at the top, filters all the way through, and anything, any characteristic of your organization can become infectious. So you want to make sure that you're fostering great characteristics. So let's jump into recognizing the warning signs. The very first one, we're going to use an acronym, SOAR. The S is for struggling leadership. Okay, I just heard you. There was like this sigh and this, oh my gosh, we have that. Don't jump in too far. Struggling leadership can be anything from a lack of vision, experiencing burnout, seeing conflict among leaders. If you have conflict between your board of directors and your executive director, that is struggling leadership. It could be even all throughout the organization. If you have a team leader that is burnt out, they're struggling to lead just their team well. A lack of vision. Sometimes as leaders of an organization, we cast the vision and we think everybody grabbed it the first time. I learned a long time ago, I had a mentor that taught me that vision is kind of like a bucket and it leaks out. And in my mind at the time, I was like, well, that's great. That's what you want it to do. You want it to leak out. And he was like, no, it leaks. So you have to keep recasting the vision and stating the vision and reminding people of the vision. Yeah, I needed that lesson and I've used it ever since. But just know, struggling leadership, what will that look like in reality? Let's just have a real heart-to-heart talk here. Struggling leadership can look like high turnover in key roles. It can look like a disengaged board, or a board that is lacking in clear vision or mission. Again, I want to caution you here. If you are an executive director or a CEO working under a board of directors that you feel has either lost their vision or lost their passion, or is having some high turnover rate, I want to be very clear. It is absolutely your job to speak to that. It's absolutely your job to pray for your board, but it is not your authority or your job to correct your board. Authority levels, they are above you. And sometimes because we're the ones with hands-on every day, we try to strive and correct something that isn't ours to correct. So I want to caution you there. I'm not talking about jumping in where your authority isn't where it should be. They're going to have to self-correct. They're going to have to self-prioritize, and they're going to have to figure out how to get back to the passion and the vision they need to lead the ministry as a whole. Sometimes, if you're looking at struggling leadership, you will find a leader that struggles and focuses on minutia. An example, I worked with a pregnancy center one time, and they were going mobile, buying a mobile unit, had gone through all the rounds of speccing the mobile unit and paying for the mobile unit. Is about a $250,000 mobile unit they were buying. They had structured it, laid it out, done everything they needed to make sure that it was what they needed to get the job done. But there was a member of the board that when it came to writing the final check and approving everything to go to build, he came to the board that evening and he refused to sign off on building the unit because the executive director had not asked about the hinges on the cabinets. No, I'm not kidding. $250,000 mobile unit with a company that builds them all the time. And the board of director was going to hold up a year of progress over $2.50 hinges. Focusing on minutia. Sometimes leaders are struggling, and so they focus on the things that they think they can handle and they think they can manage instead of focusing on the good of the organization. I've seen organizational CEOs and presidents of companies that will hold up payroll for hours and hours and hours, going back through payroll for every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes here, every checks and balance through massive payroll. One CEO I knew regularly held up payroll that was about a $50,000 payroll for hours and hours, over about $3 worth of changes, because it was something that he could control, but he could not see that it was minutia and that it was costing far more to make those changes than just to let those go. Too many distractions. You get leadership that is focused in too many different directions. What does that look like? I spoke at a banquet not too long ago, and as regular, the banquet had the donation forms, and on the back of the donation forms, it had opportunities for people who were attending the banquet to volunteer. And that's great, and that's standard, except there were 32 opportunities to volunteer for this center. Now, I've been a part of pregnancy centers for a very long time. I understand what they're volunteering for. I'm familiar with all of it. And it was overwhelming to me, the number of choices there were. I can only imagine as someone attending. What does that have to do with struggling leadership? Well, as it turned out, that was one characteristic of a leader who was very much distracted and all over everywhere and could not focus in on the point of the mission because he was all over the place. And that's just one of the ways that it presented itself at the banquet. A leader that has too many directions. Leading well is all about walking in your authority. And what do I mean by that? All authentic authority is God-given. So you do not need to hustle it. You don't need to hoard it, hide it, humiliate it, or holler it. Okay, that's a lot. No need to hustle it, which means you don't have to walk around trying to drum up that you're the leader and fight for position and try to get people to follow you. You just lead. You just walk in what you're called to do. There's no need to hoard it. Leaders sometimes get into the mindset that if I have all the information, I have all the power. If I know the most, then I am the most in charge. When truly, good leaders don't have to try to hoard information. They delegate. They pass information on. They strengthen their team members. You do not have to hoard it if you're truly walking in authentic authority. You don't have to hide it. False humility, trying to hide that you're really the one leading the team, leading the organization, that doesn't do anybody any favors as well. Again, if God has put you in that position and put you in that role, just step up and walk where he leads, period. You also never want to humiliate it. When God gives you authority or God blesses you with an anointing or a calling, the last thing you want to do is humiliate the Spirit, humiliate God that put you in that role. And so you are responsible for guarding the authority that God has given you and stewarding it well. And the last one, there's no need to holler it. I knew an executive director one time that walked up and down the hall, and multiple times a week, if she came into differing opinions, she would simply say, well, I'm the leader. Well, I'm sorry. If you have to repeatedly tell people that you're the leader and you're the one in authority, you're probably not. Just walk in it. If God has set you in that position, he will equip you, and you just walk in what he's called you to. So, what is one other area of struggling leadership? And that's leadership and governing failures. Poor governance, poor leadership, poor policies and procedures have led to substantial setbacks in organizations and ministries. In some cases, weak boards allowed CEOs or key executives far too much autonomy without sufficient oversight. Good leadership trusts but verifies. Good leadership puts policies in place as boundaries so that the people that work underneath you and around you have clear guidelines. They know their jobs. They know how far they can go. They know what's expected, and they can operate at their highest gifting because you have done your job as a leader. So that is struggling leadership. And those are some of the characteristics that you will see. So what's the O in all this good news? Operational breakdown. Poor communication, inefficient processes, or financial mismanagement all comes under operational breakdown. Again, policies, if they are outdated, one-sided. I've walked into a lot of organizations that have policy for one part of the business they do, but they haven't bothered to policy or protect the other aspects. For instance, you might have medical policy and not have accounting policy. And so you have failed to rightly manage and steward and guide the financial side, but you have done the medical side. So you don't want one-sided policies that are not being followed. One of the main mistakes that people make is they policy to such a degree that they cannot keep up and continue and operate under the policies. There's gaps in areas, cybersecurity for one. There's gaps in policying your cybersecurity, and the ones that are in place aren't being followed. You don't require your people to follow them. Nothing will get you in trouble faster in an organizational breakdown than having something policied and not doing it. So make sure that your policies are up to date. Your bylaws, again, are either outdated or too restrictive. Again, I get it, but there's some bylaws that are written that say this organization is going to have a board meeting the third Monday of every month. But you realize you've sat on the board for 2 years and you've never met on a Monday. That simple, you're out of compliance. So what do? You write your bylaws, say we will meet at least quarterly. Then if you meet monthly, you're ahead of the game. You're over and above what your bylaws state, and you're always in compliance. Another area of operational breakdown would be in the area of financial instability. I was at a center not too long ago that was spending about $1.5 million a year. Yeah, spending $1.5 million a year. The year I was there, they hadn't quite taken in 1.5, but they were spending it. When I asked to see their budget and how their money was being allocated, they let me know that they didn't have a budget. They hadn't for years. And so they were just, if they had money in the bank, they were spending money. There was no accountability. There was no oversight. The checks that were coming in were being deposited on one site. Their bookkeeper was 4 hours away, but they had various people and their children doing the deposits and seeing those stewardship checks coming in. They had all manner of financial lack of accountability, lack of good stewardship, lack of a budget. And even though they were running about $1.5 million, they had faithful donors, they had all the things, they were upside down and in danger of having to close the doors. The saddest part of that is they were located close to a very prominent abortion clinic. They needed to be there. They were doing great work in the clinic. They were doing great work with their clients. But they had to get their financial piece under control if they were going to be able to continue to operate and serve their community. Cash flow problems, misaligned budgeting. This is where we go back to what is your vision? What is your success? A lot of times we'll see budgeting done where it doesn't even match what it is you say you're standing for, what it is you say you're trying to accomplish. And that area of your budget is just minuscule, while another area that doesn't have anything to do with your primary focus has gotten out of range, out of control, and you haven't gone back and looked at that. Financial mismanagement is the number one cause of nonprofit distress. Now, that's not something we like to say, because nonprofits depend on donors' faith and donors' stewardship and donors believing in the mission. And we ought to, instead of running our centers under what other businesses run as accounting principles, generally accepted accounting principles, all the things, we should be running it with excellence and at a higher level of excellence than anybody else in the world. And yet, a lot of times, financial mismanagement is the number one cause of a nonprofit's distress. That is an area that points to potential crisis coming up. Relational tension, the R in SOAR, if we're looking at potential areas for crisis, are relational tensions. This one hits home. I can honestly say, though, when I worked in a center, you hear all kind of rumors about working in an office full of women. But the group that I worked with, I call the A-team. We had so much fun. We gathered around the table and prayed in the mornings. Those ladies were not just my coworkers. They were my friends and became family. And so relationship tensions in the workplace and in the ministry can be devastating. Strained relationships within the ministry can look like volunteer disengagement or just a plain lack of unity. If you have volunteers that are coming in and going out and coming in and going out, you might want to look deeper than just, well, they got bored or they did this or they did that. You might want to look at the relationship, because people, when they walk in your doors, can feel the atmosphere in the ministry. They can feel what it is going on in the ministry, interpersonal communications. They can feel that. You want to talk about having relationship tensions? My first question to you is going to be, tell me about the spiritual condition of your organization and the personal lives of those involved. Let's back up to, what are you doing in your personal life? Are you prayed up? Are you prepared? Are you in the Word? Are you doing what you need to do to have a peaceful and unifying spirit in the place? Are you coming together and praying together? And I know in the scope of things that sounds trivial, but it's really hard to be mad at and to be in disunity with people that you're praying with every day. Start there. Figure out the core of the unity issue. Chaos in the ranks. I'll tell you one thing about chaos in the ranks. I was at a board meeting not too long ago doing some consulting, and one of the members of the board was a pastor. And this board and this ministry had been through so much, and he spoke up and said, I'm really about to quit. I signed up because this was a ministry that did good work, and I'm afraid that we've gotten so far the other direction, like it's not even something I want to be involved with. And out of his mouth came, it has to be at least 50-50 between business and ministry, or I'm out. And at first thought, I thought, well, okay, that's fair, because every organization is both. It is ministry and it's business. But the more I thought about it, that is absolutely false. There is no such thing as a 50-50 relationship, not even between business and ministry. It's just like a marriage between the two. If you're only giving 50% to your marriage and you're thinking the other person's going to give 50, and so somehow each of you giving half to your marriage will make a great marriage, you're headed for crisis. If you do that in the organization, it is 100. Everything that takes place in your nonprofit, a faith-based nonprofit, is 100% business and 100% ministry. In a pregnancy center, some of y'all are probably thinking, well, what about on the medical side where they do the ultrasounds? Even there, it's 100% science, business, and 100% relationship, and 100% ministry. How do I know? Because the nurses doing ultrasounds at Planned Parenthood do not save lives. The nurses doing ultrasounds at pregnancy centers do. So it's not just the business that saves the lives. It's 100% showing the science of the ultrasound and 100% the focus of who is running the machine and how you speak about the baby in the womb. Can't be 50-50. It's 100. Another reason for relational tensions is lack of communication and transparency. We get in this mindset that our communication has to be the next best thing. I was talking today to someone about this very topic and how people think they have to have the newest, best, shiniest new way of communicating. Again, I worked with a center, and even though they were bleeding money. They were sure they needed the next greatest thing, online communication and ability for everybody to log in. And my answer wasn't, well, it was Texas. My answer was Texas style. I told them I didn't care if they used a Big Chief tablet and a number 2 pencil. Until you learn to communicate consistently, transparently, and well with each other, holding each other accountable, it doesn't matter what kind of technology you use, because you won't use it well if you haven't developed the discipline of communicating well. Many organizations never quite learn that lesson. I mentioned the word accountability. We don't like that word, but it is vital that we within an organization or on a team are willing to hold each other accountable for how we walk, how we treat each other, how we operate, the excellence that we give to our job. I used to have a saying in a ministry that I had, that we refuse to trip over each other to get to someone to serve. Your first line of ministry is to the people you work with, the people you have arms linked with every day. And if you are treating them poorly to get to someone to serve, you're missing out on the best part and the biggest part of the blessing of ministry, and you're in danger of crisis. The last aspect in this, looking at potential areas or warning signs of an organization in crisis, is empty vision. That would be a loss of purpose, declining enthusiasm, or a drifting mission focus. If no one in your organization can tell you the mission or vision of the organization, you may be experiencing a time of empty vision. You may need to go back and recast that. Your organization, all the leaders in your organization should be able to carry on a conversation and in their 2-minute elevator speech, give the name of the organization, the tagline, the mission statement, a little bit of the vision, and finish it out with their personal testimony of how they came to be a part of the organization and what the organization has meant to them. And you got a 2-minute elevator speech that the entire leadership of the organization can say and can be a part of and can be effective in casting that vision to others for your organization. And as they do that and they live that out and they walk that and talk that, all the members of the organization will hear and see and experience the mission and vision of your organization on a continual basis. Another symptom of empty vision is that we focus on everything but the main thing. I went into an organization one time and they did a calendar, an annual calendar, and one of the pages in the calendar was their priorities and their purposes. And this was a pregnancy center. They had all these things that they accomplished. Nowhere on the list was saving babies or proclaiming the name of Jesus Christ. Now, they said that was their number one. That was their priority. That's what they existed to accomplish. But somehow in the day-to-day operation of the ministry, those two had been left off the list. It happens quickly and it can happen easily. And we just assume that because that's what we know we're doing, we kind of read through that list of what we do with eyes that we assume that those are our top two. And somehow we forget to prioritize them and focus on them. And we begin focusing on everything but those two. All the other things work to serve as a purpose to drive those two if we're doing it well. If you have empty vision or lack of passion within the organization, your social media will reflect it. You can't fake a good vision and excitement about purpose if it's not truly and authentically a part of your culture. Your social media will reflect it. Eventually, the community support will dwindle because if you don't cast that vision and if you don't cast that purpose and hold tight to the passion that you're operating in, how is your community supposed to? They have all manner of other opportunities vying for their attention and their support. If you forget to cast a clear vision or begin to cast an empty vision, your donations and your community support will eventually dwindle because of it. Inconsistent decision making. Well, that one will get you. When you make decisions one direction or another direction based on one purpose or another purpose, no one can follow that. You don't even know your priority, and no one else in your organization will either. I did a study on grounding your vision for greatest impact. And one of them was based on the scripture that without a vision, the people perish, out of Proverbs. If you don't have your vision down, if you are not continually going back to the Lord to give you vision, to continue vision, to give you what you need to carry out that vision, the people will perish and the organization will suffer. In Ezekiel, it says, without a vision, we can be deceived. There's a lot of deception going on in this world today. And the quickest way to have an empty vision is to get deceived into something you were never meant to be a part of, or you were never meant to follow down that road. And if that vision is not carrying you straight down the path, you will be deceived in one area or another. And the last one, without a vision, we will absolutely operate in fear. Empty vision gives way to fearful decisions, to budgeting fearfully, to backing up on what you feel like God's calling you to do next out of fear, to step back in what He's called you to out of fear of what someone might say or might do. This podcast was a little delayed in some ways out of fear, just because this isn't my normal thing. This isn't what I do on an everyday basis. But I knew the Lord had called me to it. And I knew that it was something that I needed to step into and I was supposed to step into. So thankfully, we got past the fear and we stepped into where God had us. So I just want you to understand that this struggling leadership, operational breakdown, relational tensions, and empty vision, those can strike and wreak havoc in your personal life and your professional life, individually or organizationally. Be on guard. Be on guard and watch for the signs of a crisis awaiting. Thank y'all for being here for this episode. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.